Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. Welcome to the show. You know, folks, people have been talking a lot about impact investing or green investing as a critical aspect of the transition from the petrochemical economy that's choking our planet to one that is sustainable and just. And the questions being raised frequently these days, does impact investing, which means putting money to work in businesses that could lead the change to better environmental and social outcomes, actually work? You know, companies need capital to make environmentally friendly changes, to treat employees better, and to support broader social goals. But as I said, some critics have emerged even from within the green investing movement to say that we aren't necessarily on the right track. And I wanted to bring in a couple of very influential members of that conversation. Doug Heske, who's the CEO of Newday Impact Investing, and Philippe Cousteau, who is the head of EarthEcho. It's a non-governmental organization that's partnered in Newday's that focuses on developing youth programs to support change around the world. And of course, you'll know Philippe's last name. He is the grandson of Jacques Cousteau, who for many of us redefined our relationship with the oceans and most of the world through his television ventures back in the 60s and 70s. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. How are you today?
Mitch, doing great. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, Mitch, it's a pleasure.
You know, I want to start off with, there has been some criticism of this idea that we can invest our way out of the situation that we're in. What are the actual concrete examples of change you've seen in corporations as a result of impact investing over, say, the last decade? Can you kind of give us a grounding in why this works?
Yeah, of course, Mitch. Why don't I start? So this has been a really exciting period for impact investing, sustainable investing, and we like to characterize, after having now operated in this space for many years, that we finally have the wind at our backs. So this is more than just about investing, but this is about getting information into the public hands that they can activate around. So it's about providing information. It's about providing opportunities for engagement. And then certainly, as we were discussing, opportunities to invest behind the values that many of these responsibly minded individuals and institutions care so much about. The good news is that CEOs are more conscious than ever about consumer sentiments today. And I think that there is a general awareness that is arising right now that if they don't change, if organizations don't change behavior, and to your earlier point, embrace this idea of stakeholder, not just shareholder capitalism, they're going to be on the wrong side of history. So in this increasing interconnected world, we all know that companies do best when simultaneously pursuing economic value creation while also addressing societal needs. So companies that are focused on real, measurable ESG practices are building organizations that are more competitive, more productive. They have the ability to hire a higher quality set of employees, and a set of employees that really look like the rest of the world. The important part of this is that we have this massive generation of younger people now that care more about these issues than anyone else. They represent 40% of American purchasing power today. And that ultimately, given this, what everybody's talking about, this massive wealth inheritance that will transpire over the next couple of decades, are going to inherit somewhere between $45 and $65 trillion. 9 in 10 millennials believe that the success of a business should be measured by more than just financial performance. 69% believe investments are a way to express social, political, and environmental value. And all of that's really, really good news. And CEOs are paying attention to that. You know, there are large organizations and small organizations that have become very vocal around, especially within the investment business, around their desire to have ESG be a significant part of their investment methodology going forward. So there's a lot that we can say around greenwashing aspects of that, and criticisms around how some companies are doing it. The good news is that there are a lot of people paying attention to this right now, especially in the corporate world, which is going to continue to drive change going forward.
Now, Philippe, you work with a number of different large corporations through EarthEcho. How do you see this playing out?
Mitch, I've been involved in one way, shape, or form in the sustainable investment space for over a decade now. In my sense is that a couple things. One, that it is helping to provide a level of sophistication for companies. I mean, not every company and CEO out there is, a greedy, evil capitalist that wants to destroy the planet just to line their pockets. And as we've seen the ESG movement grow, as Doug was discussing, it's really been vital, I believe, to those companies that have wanted to evolve and wanted to recognize how they can, still drive profit, but do so in a responsible way. And so the evolution of the movement, I believe, has gone hand in hand with what we've seen over the last 20 years of my career, where you start to see corporations that aren't just donating money to nonprofits to try and, clean up a mess or to assuage guilt.
Or qualify their reputation.
Or exactly, like you might say, just, greenwashing. We're really seeing corporations that are genuinely looking at their operations, genuinely looking at their employee engagement, genuinely looking at all strata of their companies and how they can be more environmentally and socially responsible. To Doug's point, recognizing that it makes for better business, period. And so, I think the ESG movement has been critical in helping to understand best practices and doing encouraging that, not to mention the fact that there are, over the next coming decades, trillions and trillions of dollars governed by a younger generation that really cares about these issues.
Now, a lot of what you're saying echoes the comments of Tariq Fancy, who was with Wall Street's vast fund, the Blackstone Group, as their leading green investment program manager. And he says that ESG-based investing is, and this is a direct quote, definitely not going to work, unquote, because, as I read him, he's saying that we're too oriented to this extractive approach and focused only on profit. And so the risk is that we're financing simply shifting the damages from the companies to investors. But that's the key, is that we need to make the change from an extractive approach to an additive or socially responsible approach. How do you respond to questions from people who are listening to Fancy and other folks who are criticizing from within the green movement?
Yeah, so I don't know that I disagree with him regarding the fact that ESG is not enough, right? Mm-hmm. So we're in this world today where there's massive attention being paid to this idea of ESG, which is great because it's created this common lexicon for everybody to understand. And that's a really, really good thing. We also understand that the mere exchange of common equity from one holder to another does not beget impact, right? Mm-hmm. However, companies that use it as a tool for corporate change can have a really meaningful impact on their corporate behavior. So it comes back to this idea of this not just being about investment, but being about getting the proper information out to the public so they can adopt different, not just institutional behavior if they're organizations, but individual behaviors as well. And so with reference to ESG, it's a great baseline, right? But we need to do more. We need to create a common framework for people to understand a more systems-based approach to solving these problems. So one of the things that we characterize this as is that ESG is slowing down the sinking of the old ship, if you will. Okay. Mm-hmm. And developing a common framework for systems-based thinking is the new ship that we want to build, right? And we also need to build a bridge to that new ship. And so we're doing a lot of things as an institutional asset management organization to better understand what is the work that we need to do as fiduciary investment managers to bring about those opportunities for investors as we're thinking about a longer term future that solves these problems.
Most investors speak in terms of externalities, but when we talk about systems thinking, there really is nothing external to the economy. Everything is coming back in one way or another to pay off or to bite us with cost. Now, your Newday Impact Fund has a really interesting site. and folks, you should check this out at newdayimpact.com. It provides guidance to help you set up a portfolio that provides better environmental, social, and governance outcomes, but by theme. So, for instance, you can say, I want to focus on biodiversity protection or ocean health, and you get back a set of recommendations, including the opportunity to start to buy into some initial funds that at as little as $50 a month in order to support those goals. Tell us, where did that idea come from, Doug? I mean, you sort of gamified the program. You sort of appified the problem of investing. Are you the Robin Hood for sustainable investing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the fundamental premise of the organization was to bring about this opportunity for people that didn't have the same level of opportunities to align their values with their financial strategy to do so. Mm-hmm. And so, I have spent decades working in the traditional asset management world. And one of the things that we witness is that smaller accounts and individuals with lower levels of financial affluence didn't have those opportunities. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to build a platform that easily delivered in an understandable way this whole concept of ESG and impact. And we had a responsibility to our clients, not just to educate, but to give them opportunities to engage. So again, get involved, get informed, get invested in these issues that you really care about. And so our investment methodology is a little bit different than how a lot of organizations are looking at this today. And we do some level of negative screening, of course, for fossil fuel companies and arms manufacturers and things like that. But we're actually more about positive inclusion, because where we find an organization that has already taken meaningful steps to changing their behavior, we can get them to the next level. And so, this idea of impact around ownership of common equity doesn't go far enough, right? But where do you go from there? Can we use this as a tool to impact behavior in the corporate suite? And at the board level, yes, we can, but we've got to do it with organizations that are already making meaningful steps towards that end goal.
And picking a sustainable company is incredibly difficult. Our listeners wrestle with it. We hear questions from them all the time. What advice do you have from them, in addition to potentially investing through New Impact, to make those decisions and to exert their influence as a shareholder?
Yeah, so I think a couple things. Make sure that you're doing your research. So there are lots of big data providers right now that are doing ESG analysis, but oftentimes it ends up being sort of what I would describe as check the box research. So our process at our organization is that we screen literally thousands of organizations for their broad ESG characteristics around the globe. But that doesn't go far enough. You have to do the work behind the scenes, the bottoms up fundamental research to really understand, is what this organization saying they're doing really the case, right? And there's, especially in a world where ESG is growing so quickly right now, there's a lot of greenwashing, right? So, I would encourage everybody to do the work that they can and really understanding what's behind the scenes. We run portfolios that are a combination of both direct and indirect impact companies. So, like in the ocean health space, it would be an organization that is doing work around aquaculture, specifically around aquaculture or deep ocean exploration and things like that. And then there are a lot of indirect companies, companies like Hewlett Packard, who's developed an entire supply chain around recycled plastics, right? So the other part of your question, Mitch, is how do people get involved? It's again, doing the research and understanding of how you participate in change initiatives. So we are not an activist manager, but we're more an advocate type of manager. So we'll participate in coalition building and do everything that we can to encourage a change in corporate behavior at the organizations that are part of our portfolios where there are material issues to the health and welfare of our communities and to the organizations that are part of those organizations.
So, Philippe, I want to ask you, how do you and Newday work together at EarthEcho to drive this awareness of sustainable investing? And I guess the bigger question is, are NGOs, non-governmental organizations, an essential component in solving these systemic problems?
It's a great question, Mitch. And I'd like to go back to your comment, your question earlier about, is ESG effective and impactful, and is it enough? And I agree with Doug. It's not enough. And if we look at any of these solutions, the nonprofit movement is also insufficient to solve the problems that we face. It's a insufficient and inefficient model to be constantly seeking to raise funds. It's a very difficult thing to drive sustainability around. All of these things exist in an ecosystem together, though, and that's the key. Is any one of them by themselves will not solve these problems, but all together, along with social change and the political change that we see and the pressure that happens as these different cogs in the wheel exert pressure on each other, that's what we need to have happen. We need financial markets moving forward. We need corporations thinking about this work. We need the nonprofit sector. We need education. All of these moving in tandem together if we're going to achieve the kind of change that we need to change and achieve the kind of circular economy, for example, and eliminate, those externalities that we talked about earlier. That you're right. I talk about all the time in education and with young people in particular to understand the consequences of their choices. And so for us at EarthEcho, it's a great partnership because we're about building a youth movement globally to restore and protect our ocean planet. And fundamentally, in order to do that, we recognize that people have to change their behavior, and particularly young people drive those trends. And so that means not just beach cleanups and recycling campaigns. That means working with young people around social entrepreneurship. That means working with young people around politics and legislative action. That means advocacy, communications training, creating a sophisticated citizen and civically engaged citizen that is aware of these issues and moving forward. How they spend their money, what they buy, what they do in their spare time, all of those things matter. And so for us, it's being part of that ecosystem and being able to work with Newday and Newday support a percentage of the management fee of the Ocean Health Fund helps to support EarthEcho. So that is a very clear transaction. Newday supports the organization and allows us to move forward and continue to invest in building that awareness, building that literacy on the part of a new generation of young people around the world to take action around these environmental issues. But then we also get to work with Newday and the SIFMA Foundation, and that's terrific because the SIFMA Foundation is another nonprofit, and their focus is on fostering financial literacy in young people. And they have a program called the Stock Market Game where young people can manage a hypothetical portfolio of about $100,000 in stocks and bonds, mutual funds, in order to gain that financial literacy. They reached about 20 million kids over the last 40 years. And in partnership with Newday, now young people can choose an ESG compliant stocks that they can put into their portfolios and start to understand how that works. And so we collaborate with the SIFMA Foundation now because environmental literacy around the blue economy, for example. I just did a lecture for the SIFMA Foundation a few weeks ago about the blue economy and driving capital towards sustainable and positive aspects of the blue economy. As Doug said, kelp and seaweed aquaculture, for example, new technologies, leveraging algae to make plastics. Those kinds of new companies require capital. And so being able to encourage young people to think about how they can get involved in those businesses, see that as a track for them in terms of their economic future is really, really important as we continue to foster and build and support the growth of those kinds of sustainable industries.
Well, and I think one of the reflections that I have, and I think back to the state of the world when, for instance, I was watching your grandfather introduce me to sharks and whales. The world was not full of plastic in the 1960s. And of course, in The Graduate, Benjamin Braddock was told plastics was the future. And he fled the scene. Actually, the character just bailed. But getting involved in this awareness amongst youth of the economic power they have is profound. And because they're connected in a way we weren't back then, I think that's the real lever of change. Now, with the SIFMA Foundation and the national stock market game, you're also focusing on communities of color. How are you bringing the social justice element to the fore along with the environmental through those educational programs at EarthEcho?
Well, at EarthEcho, we believe that both of those things, social justice and environmental conservation and health, are so intertwined. You can't really separate them. When you think about things like climate change, like that crisis, most of the people that tend to be on the front lines of the damage from climate change tend to be communities of colors, right. So lower socioeconomic income around the world. They're on the front lines. They're suffering disproportionately. And so, look at air pollution, water quality. All of these issues tend to affect people, people of color and communities of color. And of course, people with, a lower economic income. And so, for us in our work as an organization that focuses on young people, focuses on building a constituency, growing a constituency of people that care, because that's what we have to do. Historically, Mitch, and we work with a lot of large-scale nonprofit organizations and the big foundations, and they do terrific work. But one place that they have a blind spot and have missed an opportunity the last 40 years is investing in growing a movement of young people, growing a movement in society, and growing the audience of the converted, as we like to say. Mm-hmm. Instead of, historically, it's really been focusing on the converted, speaking to ourselves, navel gazing, if you will. And we're really about growing that audience. How do we create a larger constituency of people? And that includes reaching out to communities that have historically not been part of this conversation. We need people everywhere to feel invested in the environment, in the health of the environment, and thus the health of themselves. And so that is really, really, really important if we're going to create the political will and the social foundation to create that political will in this country. To make the kinds of changes that we need to make politically, we need enough of an electorate and society at large to demand it. And that includes those communities that have been largely left out of the conversation over the last several decades. We're all in this together,
That's very well said. And Mitch, let me give you a great example of this. So it was about 30 days ago, as Philippe had shared, that he did an event for SIFMA that was attended by, I think, more than 100 classrooms with students around the country. And there was a young man that sat by his side during the event that we did that it just gave this incredibly inspirational and powerful perspective on why he was involved in supporting ocean health and what younger people can do and how they can engage. And it was just after we did that session that I got a phone call from one of my colleagues who were doing a lot of powerful diversity and inclusion work in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. Her name is Dolores Henderson, Dr. Dolores Henderson, who runs Dolores Works. And she said, we need to get Philippe into the community up here because our kids, as a part of the public school system here in Minnesota, are missing out on this. They need to be attending these types of events. So, this is all about elevation, amplification of the powerful work that EarthEcho is doing through, Philippe's advocacy for ocean health and all of the people that are a part of that organization. This is how we empower individuals, younger people, to go out and make a change.
I'm struck by the notion that every generation educates its workers. And we have been focused on an educational system that serves a previous economy, and we're not there yet. And you're describing how we activate that new generation, not only of investors, but customers and employees. Now, at Newday, you do some remarkable things, like you're donating 5% of your management fees to NGOs in order to support this. When somebody invests through Newday, can they get involved and help designate how those contributions are made? Are you democratizing even that level?
We very much listen to the feedback that we get from our users, which are people that are just downloading the application and not necessarily setting up an investment account, and all of our investors, which are both retail investors and family offices, endowments, and foundations. That feedback for us is critically important. So, we have envisioned building into our platform on a go-forward basis an opportunity whereby people, at least retail investors, can participate in the charitable cause. Through a number of these events that we're doing, and we've got one coming up with Philippe and his team at EarthEcho International on June 8th for World Oceans Day. There will be opportunities for people that participate in that event to make direct charitable contributions into the EarthEcho International organization.
Now, I just want to wrap up with a couple of practical questions for our listeners. How would you advise somebody to get started today in sustainable investing for sustainable outcomes? And is there a different approach for younger and older people that you would recommend? And I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on it.
So I think that the best way to get started is by getting informed, right? So certainly people can do that by downloading the Newday Impact application that's available on iOS and Android. But there is so much information right now on the web that is aligned with a particular value. So if you define yourself as an ocean health advocate, Google ocean health, right? If you're a clean water advocate, go out and search clean water and sanitation. And so there's just a proliferation of information on the web today because people care, right? And then you can start small. And especially for a younger investor, this idea of wedding profit with purpose is so incredibly important. And if you start at an early age and you're making systematic investments into an investment program and something that you care about, this nest egg that you're building for the future can be really, really powerful and significant. And then on the institutional side, it's been interesting talking to many families around the country, and there's a wide berth between the work that they're doing. There are major families that have already made decisions to go, as an example, 100% fossil free across their entire investment portfolios. And then there are a set of families that haven't even begun that process, and lots in between. Right. And I would say the same thing for corporate organizations. The good news is that 90% of CEOs today are saying their customers have the biggest impact today on their go-forward strategy. That's really, really important information as you think about the advancement of all of these causes on a go-forward basis.
Philippe, what are your perspective on this?
Well, listen, those are the types of resources. I use Newday Impact myself. I think it's a tremendous tool. The app in particular is so easy to use, and I encourage anybody. Obviously, the Ocean Health Fund is what supports EarthEcho, but it's tools like that, and that's what's exciting. 15 years ago, or about 13 years ago, I collaborated with a company in Bethesda, Maryland, and Advisor Shares, and we launched an exchange traded fund on the New York Stock Exchange that had an ESG strategy, one of the first. Mm-hmm. It was a lot harder back then. Funny story, our ticker symbol was GIVE, G-I-V-E. It was still available. I was not surprised, I must say, that idea, that ticker symbol was still available on the New York Stock Exchange. So many more sophisticated resources and tools like Newday that exist today for particularly for retail investors. That's what the tool that I use, frankly. Lots of great resources. Also, Rockefeller Foundation is one that we've been involved with over the years, that provides terrific resources online for folks that are interested in impact investing, what it means, ESG, how it works. They're doing a lot of great work in that space as well.
Well, I want to thank both of you for talking to us today, and I hope you come back and continue this discussion because it's a fascinating future that we are forging together.
It's just the beginning, Mitch. I think there's so much tremendous opportunity, certainly many challenges ahead. But if we all come together and work together, I do believe that there's hope for the future.
Well, thank both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Mitch, thank you very much. Good to chat with you.
Well, folks, that was Doug Heske. He's the CEO of Newday Impact Fund. They are at newdayimpact.com. Check them out. They're an investment company that will help you set up a green, environmentally and socially responsible portfolio. They've got strategies and they have funds that you can buy into for a very low amount each month. And of course, Philippe Cousteau, who is the founder of EarthEcho. They're at earthecho.org. They create programs to educate and empower youth to reshape society for a sustainable, environmentally responsible future. We'll be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, this is Mitch Ratcliffe, and you're listening to Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. Folks, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. We'll be back soon.